All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Francine Rolling, and I'm joining in with my friends, Tammy Johnson and Jessica Kaiser tonight. And we were just chatting a little before we got started about some of the things going on in our world and how that just increases our stress level. And that's exactly why we're having this health chat tonight, is because every day, no matter where you are, who you are, we are bombarded with stressors. And over the last several months, we've been just, impacted by stressors that have been just a little more unique to us, to our lives, to anything perhaps that we've ever experienced before. And it just brought to mind the fact that these are in some ways unprecedented times, right? And we're expected to kind of roll with the punches with some of the things that we're experiencing perhaps for the first time in our lives, but yet still keep up with, the family duties that we have and just the other things that impact our lives on a regular basis. But now this is just value added. It's just more than what we've ever been used to having. And if you are out and about, a lot of times you'll hear people comment about things that they're experiencing, and it's interesting because people have different ways of expressing themselves, right? So anyway, we were talking about all these things and just how we are all connected. Whether we agree with people or disagree with people, we're all connected, and we're all experiencing stress, whether it's during a pandemic or any other time of our lives. And Jessica, being a therapist, has just some really great knowledge about how biologically we're wired to experience stress and cope with that. And so we thought it would be a great time to have a series about some of these mental health challenges that we face, just to kind of bring it a little more to our attention, hopefully to learn a little bit more about what we do experience, what everybody else experiences, with the goal that perhaps that'll just help us to be more understanding of not only other people, but of ourselves as well. And with the hope that that would connect us more in a positive way to one another, since we are all part of one large community. So that's our goal for tonight. And then we're going to do a couple other sessions along this line too. We'll tell you a bit more about that before the end of the evening tonight. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know too that whether you're experiencing, I guess for lack of better terms, we'll call it good stress or bad stress. Stress is stress, right? No matter if it's something that you signed up for or just kind of got thrown in your lap. Our family this summer has had a lot of great things going on, but they've been stressful too. We had a daughter get married out of state. We had company staying with us. My husband retired from one job. We moved across the state, bought a house, sold a house, all these things were all awesome. They happened in like a span of like 4 weeks. So there was a lot of stress involved with all of that too. And even though those were all welcome changes, I mean, I found myself just being tired and, not having my usual energy level and being maybe a little more cranky with other people, not as patient with others, and even having some physical symptoms, the pit in your stomach kind of thing sometimes. All that stuff, my skin would break out. I still get teenage acne when I'm under stress. And so all of those things were happening. And so I'm personally thrilled that we're going to be talking about this tonight because I've faced it. And Tammy's going to share a little bit about some of the stresses her family has faced this year as well. So, but let's get started with Jessica. Jessica is joining us actually from Canada. This is just the beauty of being able to have Zoom and connect people from all over the world. Jessica is a mental health therapist, and she's going to start us off just talking a little bit more to, let's start, Jessica, talking about that connection piece. So In your field, are you seeing that too, that the connection is important between people, and has that changed a little bit this year, perhaps, with what you're seeing?
Oh my goodness, Francine. Absolutely. Um, it has changed in significant ways. And I think in order for us to, understand a little bit about what the impact the impact that it's had, we kind of need to back up and start with what stress is like and what stress does. And you raised a really good point. We've all been under increased stress lately, but stress isn't actually a bad thing. So, like, for example, your short amount of time with a lot of things going on in your life caused a lot of stress, but some of those were wonderful things. So I think we sometimes get the idea that stress gets a bad rap. But the reality is there's definitely a difference between good stress and bad stress. And I'd like to talk about that for just a few minutes before we talk about the connection to community, because I think that it'll help us really understand how powerful the changes this past year and a half have been.
Yeah.
So I want to start by clarifying that good stress is really, really healthy for us. All of our stress is run by a network in the lower center part of our brain. And the entire purpose of this network is to prepare us to, as effectively as we can, deal with whatever it is that's coming at us, whether that's daughters getting married or a move or something less positive, like a car accident. All of those things trigger that part of our brain to try and do its best to help us get through that situation. Good stress is when something jumps up, comes into our lives, and our stress response spikes. It prepares us to deal with that thing. We deal with the thing, and then our stress levels can come back down, and we can go on with our day because we've successfully navigated whatever the thing is. That we call healthy stress, and we actually are really lucky to have that. That's what got you through all the stuff that you had to do. It was stressful, but that stress actually keeps you alert, keeps you paying attention, and keeps you moving through things very intently and intentionally, right? That's what good stress looks like. The challenge that we have faced, and not even just this year, but prior to this year, is that in modern society, what we're running into is higher than is healthy levels of the bad kind of stress, and that's chronic stress. And the difference is that good stress does this and then calms down, and chronic stress are the triggers that kind of worry us. They're in the back of our heads. There are things that we're not quite sure how we're going to handle. They're unknowns. There are things like that. They kind of sneak and they elevate our stress levels. And then because those things never get resolved, our stress levels just keep going. That's chronic stress, and that's actually really unhealthy for us. And so when we think about some of the things that this pandemic has done to our stress levels, it's the chronic stress that's been elevated that's really causing a lot of challenges for people. And like I said, it's not 100% because of the pandemic. If we had this conversation 2 years ago, before any of us had probably heard the word COVID, I would have still, and many of us in the mental health world would have absolutely been saying, modern life is creating a lot of chronic stress that didn't exist 50 or 100 or further, before. It didn't exist back then to these levels. And at that time, I would have said there are a lot of really powerful forces in our world that are adding to our chronic stress load. And it would have been things like the speed with which we are all living now, that, even our grandparents, everything has picked up speed. And if you go back further in time, things were even slower, right? Everything we do now is fast. We multitask more than our ancestors ever have. And not just once in a while, we are almost always multitasking. And that is extra stress on our brain. And it's not stress that comes and goes. It's kind of a chronic thing. Technology, the intensity with which we are expected to constantly keep up with and adapt to new technology is also a chronic stressor. And related to that, the enormity in terms of the amount of information that our brain is asked to process, it's astronomical compared to what our ancestors would have had to do. So really, we in modern times have been facing a lot of triggers that kind of, they raise this chronic stress level. And that's tricky because it doesn't go anywhere and it sits there and wears and tears on our brain and our body. Oh, Shannon makes a good point. Yeah, the immediacy that we 24/7, we're bombarded with things that, from all corners of the globe in all languages. It's just, we take it for granted, but this is all very new to the human brain. For thousands of years, this would have been unheard of. So we take that and then we layer a pandemic on top of it. And chronic stress has really been through the roof for a lot of people. And I think there are some obvious ways that the pandemic has created extra stress. I mean, it is really understandable that the fear of being exposed to a virus would cause us distress, right? Not knowing where we're going to get it or who might expose us. Definitely a reasonable reason to get stressed. Fear around your job changing, right? Like fear around you having to work from home when that's nothing you've ever done before. As a parent, fear around having to homeschool your kids or figure out how to educate them when you're not a teacher, right? These are really easily identifiable stressors that we've all been through, right? One form or another. And those I think we register and we recognize, yeah, that's increasing my stress level. But when we first started talking about this topic and having this meeting, it really got me thinking about the fact that one of the most profound ways this pandemic has impacted us, and I don't think we've all thought it through enough, is our connections, our relationships, our connections, and our community. And I think in order to really understand that, we do need to get back to a little bit of brain science. And that is the idea that for as long as humans have been on this planet, relationship, connection, and community has been essential to survival, right? It's at the core of what we need as humans. From the very beginning, community has kept us alive, right? We needed each other for safety. Community is how we pass on knowledge. It's how we learn new skills. It's how we identify our purpose. It's how we identify our sense of self, who we are, and what our purpose is, in this world. And even now, like, I think if we were all to think about what are the core identities that I connect with? Like, who am I and what's my purpose? I would say things like, I'm a mom. That's at the core of who I am. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm a therapist. I'm a Canadian. All of these things, if you think about them, all of them are relationship based. We at our core, our everything we do is really about relationships. So if we recognize how central that is, then it makes sense that anything that impacts our relationships is going to be powerful. It's going to have a powerful impact. And to take that a step further, our brain, because of how central relationships are to who we are and to how we survive, our brain has developed over eons really powerful tools to help us monitor, maintain, assess, engage, and interact in our relationships, in our connections, in our community, right? Yeah. And if we think about some of those core skills that our brain has for thousands of years just done automatically, all of those have been challenged this year, right? Like the first one is reading facial expressions. We do that. It's one of the most powerful tools our brain has, right? And we do it all day long. Even when you're scrolling on your phone, your brain is actually quickly assessing faces as it goes by. Is that friend or is that foe? Is that someone I know? Is that a stranger, right? We've been walking around trying to assess people's faces, and think about how much harder that is for your brain. Yeah. It's incredibly intense. So that's one skill, right? Reading facial expressions. Another skill that's really core to how we understand our relationships is body language, right? We read body language every time we walk into a room. I think about my team meetings a year and a half ago, and I'd walk in, there's 12 other therapists, and you can tell who's engaged, who's tired, who's irritated, right? And here we are sitting on a screen, and none of us can really read each other's body language. And so for the past year, we've been doing this a lot, and it is taxing our brain. Our brain works twice as hard when it doesn't have the regular data that it's used to getting, right? Proximity is another one. When you walk into a room, your body, you position yourself and your mind assesses how close, whether someone's leaning in, whether they're leaning back. These are all essential tools that are so important that they are literally running nonstop, those programs in our brain. And for the last year and a half, all of them have been the equivalent of shackled, right? Like it's been so much harder. And so think of how much extra pressure that puts on our stress response, because when we can't do what we normally do naturally, our brain goes into stress mode, which is, I can't quite determine as easily as usual whether these people are friend or foe, or whether I'm in a safe place, or where I stand. And the last piece is also the environments that we've been in, because I think the other piece we've all faced is a lot of how we feel like we belong in community is literally just about being in the same room with people, right? Like I was
Mhm.
thinking about that today. One of the simplest examples I can think of is my kids' elementary school. I live right across from my kids' school. And I, before this year, would have popped in multiple times, sometimes to pick them up after school, sometimes to drop something off, all of these things. And every time I do that, I get a sense of the kids in my kids' class, of the parents, of the teachers. And it's not even that those relationships are central to my survival, but they all give us a sense of where we fit. Like, where do I belong in the community? You know what? All these people, they're all parents like me, and I belong here, right? And that's been missing for a year and a half, right? So I guess I'm probably belaboring the point, but I feel like when we step back and we really look at how much our connections and our relationships have been challenged this year, it makes a lot of sense that everybody in one way or another is experiencing sort of chronic levels of distress. Even if we don't always know exactly which piece of this it is, all of these things have been the reality that we've been experiencing, and it's taken a big toll.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
It does.
Back at the start of my professional career, I worked for the Department of Social Services. And so I worked with families and kids who were at risk of being abused or neglected. And I worked not often, but I worked from time to time with babies who were born and had the label of failure to thrive.
Yes.
They had a lot of, medical conditions, and so they weren't growing and developing the way they should. And one of the ways that those babies would get treatment was people would there were volunteers who would hold those babies and swaddle those babies and just give them that physical touch. I mean, that's how important that touch, just touching people and being in that close, loving proximity to one another is. Like, it can literally help you survive or wither away as a person. It's so fundamental. And so you're right, Jessica. I mean, the things you were describing too, all those social cues, that's one of the biggest things kids get from school. And we'll talk about this more when we have our session about kids. But academics are super important, but it's that socialization too, learning how to interact with each other and communicate and read facial cues and body language and be a good friend, all those things. Those are the things that make you a successful citizen for the rest of your life, and we're not having the opportunity to practice that as much. Children aren't, nor are adults. I mean, we're forgetting how to interact with people too, and if somebody is an introvert too, it becomes more and more difficult because you're not in those situations where you can practice those things that may not be as comfortable for you anyway. And so it just makes it all that more difficult than when you are, again, with people and not knowing how to interact again. So we're learning all those basic skills all over again.
Yeah. And it's been harder because it's not like you can just go out into the environment and do them. There's stuff getting in the way, whether it's masks or distance or screens. It's been a challenge for everybody.
Yeah. Jessica,
Absolutely.
I had a question just about, could you go over explain how the physiology of this, what happens physiologically? Because when we're on that chronic level of stress all the time, what is your body releasing? So I think that's kind of interesting too.
Sure, I can do that now. So to dig a little bit deeper into the stress response, right? It's this network, like I said, and its job is to protect you, to prepare you to be able to protect yourself, right? And it basically has three options. When it gets activated, it prepares us to either fight, flight, or freeze. And whether it's a chronic stressor or an immediate stressor in your face, those are the three options it has. And there is an incredibly quick and powerful full body response that happens when your stress is activated to prepare you to do one of those three things. And I can quickly run through that because I think it's worth repeating for those of us who maybe haven't spent tons of time studying the stress response, like nerds like me. The first thing that happens when your brain is activated, I love brain stuff, so I nerd out on this stuff.
I do too.
That's awesome. Your body is flooded with hormones, and there are two main hormones that are players in this, and that is cortisol and adrenaline. And both of those are incredibly powerful chemicals that literally flood through your system and I guess the best way to describe it is they literally change the priority list that existed in your body and your mind the second before, right? Like whatever you were doing suddenly gets changed because right now preparing for fight, flight, or freeze is important. Any systems in your body that would be important to fight, flight, or freeze get bumped up the priority list. And any systems that are not important to fight, flight, or freeze get bumped down the priority list. And that's because we get a surge of resources that go towards those important systems, right? And we only have a finite amount of resources, so they're taken away from the systems that aren't priorities. And when we look at what is the impact physiologically of stress, that's where it comes from. So the first thing that'll happen after those stress hormones flood is that you will have an immediate cascade of physiological experiences. Your heart will start to beat faster. Your body's trying to get blood out to your extremities for fight or flight. Your blood pressure will increase. You will start to breathe more quick and more shallow because you're trying to oxygenate your blood for the fight or flight. Your pupils are going to dilate so that you can see really clearly what's in front of you. You're going to start to sweat. It's your body turning on your coolant system in case you need to run away from a bear. All of these sorts of physiological, all of those systems get a surge. Basically every muscle in your body tenses because you need to be in a state of tension for fight, flight, or freeze. And then the flip side of that, the systems that get less resources during this, in fact, that are kind of shut off during a stress response. There are several of them, but the three that I think are most important to be aware of. When you have a full stress response, your digestion comes to a screeching halt because digestion is not a priority during a stressful event, right? And so people with chronically high levels of stress will almost always have some impact on their digestive system somewhere along the line. High levels of stress also impact our immune system in a negative way. That's one of the other systems that gets shut off because in the moment, if you're dealing with a stressful event, fighting a flu bug, whatever bug that might be, isn't a priority. You need to survive this moment. And so your immune system is compromised when your stress is activated. The third thing that I think is really important to note is whenever that lower center stress response is activated, the smartest part of our brain, this frontal cortex up here, gets reduced blood flow. So we literally cannot think as clearly, cannot problem solve, cannot use the smartest part of our brain as effectively. Because in the moment, when our brain feels like this is a fight, flight, or freeze situation, speed and instinct is more important than thinking it through. And that's fine for this kind of stress. When someone cuts you off in traffic and you need to slam on your brakes, you don't need to stop and analyze it. You just need to quickly react and slam on your brakes. But when we're talking about, I have to wrap my head around a job change, or I have to wrap my head around kids being home and I'm educating them during a pandemic, that's not going to come and go. And when my stress levels stay up here, what that means is there's excessive wear and tear on all of my systems, from my heart to my brain to my blood pressure. All of them are impacted significantly at a physiological level by this elevated stress. Yeah. So it's pretty powerful.
So that explains why people who experience chronic stress are more prone to have heart attacks or heart trouble, or a number of things. Yeah, because it's all impacted. Yeah. Oh, that's so good, Jessica.
Wow.
Okay. Well, so one thing we do with our kids, right? If you're a parent or you're the neighbor to a child, or you were a teacher, or anything, any experience you've had with kids, a lot of times we try to prepare them for things that are going to happen next, right? In a way to decrease their stress, so just so they know what to expect and walk them through that. But that's one thing that this pandemic has done. It's kind of taken away that natural ability for us to be able to say what's going to happen next, because we're all walking through this for the first time ourselves. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, right? And Tammy, your family has experienced a situation during this time that was unexpected and caused stress. Can you share a little bit about that with us, and how maybe some of the ways you're coping with it too? I think that would be helpful to share too.
Like you said, I'm Tammy Johnson, and my husband was a computer administrator, and he had worked at a company for 15 years. And it's a fairly large company, and he had a pretty significant role in what he did, and he did a great job with it. But it was getting stressful in general, just because some of the people that were working with him were ready to retire, and they were just kind of filling in their hours. So when he would have like general meetings, sometimes he felt like he wasn't really listened to, or different things. So there were some little stressors going on even during the time that he was there. But he was okay with that. He was thinking, okay, 5 more years or so, I'm gonna keep doing it. I work hard, I do a great job, and I leave my job every day at a certain time, and I feel good about what I'm doing. But never in a million years did we think that we would be the people that would be laid off. And a week and a half ago, he knew 2 of his people were going to be laid off. So he thought maybe he would not be. He didn't even cross his mind, honestly. And that morning when they were going to lay off other people, they called him in 15 minutes before he was going to get on with some other people. They called a meeting. And here on that meeting was HR and a bunch of people saying, Steve, thank you for your service with WPS, but we're going to let you go. And Steve came out, he looked like he was a deer in headlights. Because, I mean, really, it just never even crossed his mind. That happens to other people. That doesn't happen to us, you know? And so just this whole different piece that Jessica was talking about, how all of a sudden, like, high anxiety for him and, you know, just going through different grief processes. Like, I know I wanted to move on to another job that I would like better, but I didn't think it would be now. Right. And on a positive, we had made some decisions a long time ago that have caused us to be debt free. And so I know that's not always the case for situations. I'm 60 and he's 59. So he married an older woman. Yeah. He called, he said, I robbed the cradle. And I'm like, okay. You know. Anyway, I mean, he's still young enough to enjoy more work. And he knew he wanted to do something, but it's just been challenging. We've been going through all the different gamuts of our emotions, and just when he'd be just really stressful, I'm like, okay, he's just going through the thought processes of, okay, I did a great job, but they still let me go. There's still that rejection piece that goes on. And so I know his whole body is experiencing this chronic, you know, stress level. And I know it pressures off on me too. So I think I'll kind of go over some things we've been doing, but I mean, even the other day when I went to the grocery store, I mean, I felt like pulling everybody that worked there, their hair out, because there were so many glitchy things that happened on those self-checkouts. And I knew it was because I just didn't have the patience to slowly scan stuff. I actually put 46 lemons in instead of 2. And so it was $82 that they had a credit. So then at the end of when I had to pay for it, she had taken off $82. Well, it wouldn't let me pay for the order because you can only have a credit of 20, apparently. Then an upper level person has to come in and clear it, right? So there was that piece. I mean, just odd things. But I mean, I went out of there like, I don't ever want to shop here again. And it had nothing to do with them, really. It was just safe precautions that they had put on their system so employees wouldn't be, you know, giving product to people or, you know, different things. So I just realized, okay, I also am allowing myself to, of course, feel the stress of, okay, he's not working right now. We're going to be paid for quite a while, but we want him to launch into something that he really wants to launch into. And so, and then also at the same time, I've got 4 adult children and 1 family grouping came this last weekend. And then this week I had an unexpected family stay with us with 4 kids because her dad died. And then all my kids are having different people stay with us just because they have friends in town. So, I mean, all these things on top, these are good things, but I found myself really stressed and feeling frustrated, you know, and experiencing the things you were telling about. I just wanted to, well, the minute I heard about Steve losing his job, I'm like, okay, I texted all the kids, so whose lease is up first, who wants to move in and just pay the basic bills, and we're out of here. You know, honestly, I'm saying we're going to go travel for 3 months because you're paid through the end of January and we're good. And because we don't have bills except for like the property taxes, you know, the normal, the phone bill, the things that you continue to live on even when you're retired. And then the second part of that was just to fight. Well, wait a minute. You should call them and don't they need you still? I mean, who's going to do your work at this company? And then for some time, I kind of freeze like, okay, I can't buy anything unless we absolutely need it. And I like to buy little resale clothes for my grandkids. Are any of you in that spot? Or even for your kids? Isn't it fun to get them a new little hat or a little bow for their hat or little ball? I mean, you know. And so, so it just puts you in all those different spaces at different times through the processing.
Yeah.
So anyway, not to belabor it, for us, I think we found exercise has been really good. Sometimes jotting down what are some new things that we want to do before Steve gets his job, and so what we need to ask off. Another thing for him was writing down what exactly does he want to do? What is he looking for in the next job?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's been kind of doing that, so he knows that when he's looking, it's going to have certain things. It's going to have less stress, and it's going to be making a difference in the lives of others. So he did just apply today for Salvation Army. There was a position that fit quite a few of his skills, and he's kind of excited if that would be something that would open up for us. We don't know. I also find journaling, writing down my feelings, like I'm feeling more attacked by my husband, even though he's not. He's just bringing up really encouraging, uplifting suggestions for me, but I've been taking it as, why aren't you liking me the way I am? You know? And then I think about, I'm like, well, these are really helpful suggestions in relationships. So I think sometimes journaling about what happened and helping yourself to look out of it has been really helpful too.
Yeah.
And then to realize sometimes my husband just needs me to come alongside him and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is what we're going through. And, you know, as good of a job you had, and as hard as it is to be let go, there's something new going on that we can grow together in. This can bring us together. It doesn't have to draw us apart.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids have been so dear. I mean, they've even cried over it themselves, even though Steve's in a good place. I mean, you know, we have money saved for if we don't have another job. We have a plan B because I'm doing Shaklee, and I've been able to earn an income that's been able to supply us with a lot of extras. So that's something I highly recommend for people, to look for something that will give you a plan B that's passive income. It took a lot of the burden off. In fact, I had no fear when I heard out he lost his job, because I was like, oh my goodness, I mean, he's not working. So that was a piece too. He's in the kitchen same time as I am. I'm like, wait a minute, you're not here at this time usually, or you know what I mean? So we are working through that too. But I just highly recommend that people look back, exercise, journal, read some books, and do some things, some self-care for you that will help you be a better person yourself, be a better mate if you are married, or be a friend for your neighbors. Start doing things for other people, making meals for them, hosting people. Do something that helps you to give back, even though you're feeling like something's changed. That's big.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those have been really big things for me.
Well,
And
Tammy, thank you for sharing all that. And I'm so sorry you've experienced that, but you hit on so many things. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, just the fact that, you know, all these stressors too, there's a grief component attached to it. And so there is a process with that. And as you explained, you're going through that. And what's happening with these stressors is it makes us out of control of our environment, right? Which, if you think about it, we're never actually in control of our environment, but there are times we're more comfortable and we kind of can assume certain things are going to happen certain ways. But when the rug's pulled out from you like this, it takes away all that comfort. And you highlighted just so beautifully just the community piece of it. I mean, you and your husband, of course, you know, that's a marital relationship, but any type of relationship you have with somebody, you know, when one person's impacted, it impacts somebody else too. So thank you for sharing some of the things that you all are doing that have been helpful. On that note, Jessica, can you suggest some other things that can be helpful to help people deal with stress and the crisis that may be occurring in their lives?
Absolutely. And I think Tammy hit on a lot of the most important things, right? Like if we acknowledge, first of all, that we're all experiencing higher stress levels, then I think step one is to really get back to the basics, which is the core of self-care, right? I think I think when we have higher stress levels, it's even more important for us to do the basics like getting exercise, drinking water, getting a decent amount of sleep, and getting core nutrition, eating your fruits and vegetables, and making sure you're getting in the things that you need. Because when our stress levels are high, we burn through our resources so much quicker, our internal resources, right? And so even if it may seem like eating a salad isn't going to do much about this other big thing happening in my life, the truth is, if you don't eat a salad, you're going to be even worse off in terms of how much capacity you have to cope, right? So there are lots of other important steps you can take, but the step one is to get back to the basics and really focus on self-care. I think the second thing I would recommend that everyone does is find things that they enjoy and intentionally do them every day, because when we do things we enjoy, it just naturally brings our stress level down. Like it just is it's a given. So if we are chronically walking around with higher stress levels, and then we go watch our favorite show, simple as that, or, go out for coffee with a friend, or whatever it is that just feels good. And it can be whatever that is for anyone. It's not about what it is. It's about how it makes you feel. Doing things that reduce your stress levels and putting them into your day intentionally. Don't wait until you feel so overwhelmed that you need to go do something. It's much better to do it preventatively, to do it every day, to give your brain a break, a little bit of a stress break by doing something that you find it makes you feel good. And then, if you have extra time on top of that, then anytime someone can adopt a mindfulness strategy or journaling or meditation or prayer or something that we know from the research and from the literature brings down your stress response, anytime you can add that to your day, that's going to be beneficial. But I always say start with the basics. Just really focus on taking good care of yourself, because quite often when we're stressed, we forget about self-care. It kind of goes out the window, and then we're in twice as much trouble, because now we have high stress levels and we're depleted, and we can't, it's hard to cope, and it's hard to help the other people in our lives. And so I think that's a really important place for all of us to focus right now. And we need to prioritize it, right? Not wait till we are so desperate that we, feel like we're in big trouble. Yeah.
Thank you. One other thing that we put together, along with those tangible resources that Jessica and Tammy just shared with you, is a list of websites and phone numbers and apps, just lots of different tools that could be helpful if you're looking for certain resources or just want some more information, or maybe, looking for programs or ways to even be involved. Everything we talked about tonight falls under the mental health category. And it's interesting because there are still people who just don't even understand that everybody deals with mental health. Just like we have physical health, we have mental health too, right? And some days we're really on top of our game and we're super healthy, and some days we're not. And then the next day you are again. I mean, it's just like a continuum, and it just goes round and round. So just the educational piece, I think, is so important, just to help people be, again, more understanding of one another, to reduce stigma too, but also just to be able to, I sound like a Coca-Cola commercial from the 70s, but to live in harmony with one another, teach the world to sing and all that stuff. So anyway, I think all those resources can help us in that area too. So we will, there's a Facebook group that we developed to go along with this Zoom event. So we'll post the resource sheet in there, but if you have trouble accessing it for some, actually Tammy already posted it, but if you can't find it or you'd like us to send it to you, we're glad to do that as well. So and then we thought we would do 2 more segments, because this is such an overwhelmingly large topic that we wanted to do another health chat like this, specifically focused on children, and then another one to talk a little bit more in depth about self-care, some of the resources and how to use those and that kind of thing. So we are so thrilled that you spent some time with us tonight, and we'd love for you to join us when we have the next sessions too in the next couple of weeks. We'll be sure and let you know when those are. We'll post those in the group too, as well as other ways that we communicate that out. And anyway, we just thank you. Tammy, if you can stop the recording.